Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's another week of this podcast series on quality management system essentials. And just a recap is that we have gone through the introduction, facilities and safety, organization, equipment management, purchasing and inventory, and process control and quality management podcasts. Now, our lab is ready and we want to think about the next step that is on the journey to accreditation. Where do we start from? So, in today's podcast, I'm going to take you through assessment and, um, and accreditation, and take you through a series of scenarios and how we can go through this. So at the end of this norms and accreditation podcast, we should be able to do the following. One, compare and contrast accreditation, certification, and licensure. Describe the process involved in development of standards. And lastly, discuss the need for laboratory norms and standards. So we are going to look at those three areas. How do we compare and contrast what is accreditation, what is certification, what is licensure, and the differences and the similarities between them, if any. We are also going to describe the process involved in development of standards, and also we will discuss the need for laboratory norms and standards. So as usual, I want to lay out a scenario for us to think through as we are participating in this podcast. And the scenario is that your hospital administrator has asked you, the lab director or lab manager, to examine the possibility of having the laboratory accredited. Your hospital administrator has asked you, the lab director or lab manager, to examine the possibility of having the laboratory accredited. What does it mean to be accredited? Where can you get the information and how would you get started? So in my last job, I said in one of my podcasts that I received almost a 15-page appointment letter. And when I met with my supervisor, I asked him if he can possibly reduce that 15-pager to one or two bullets. And this is what he told me. I want you to establish and run an international lab, and to have it accredited to international standards. So those are my marching orders. Establish the lab, run it, and have it accredited to international standards. So I set my eyes on having the lab ISO 15189 accredited. So I'm going to take you through that. Now, why do we even need a lab assessment? And we need this as a recognition of delivering accurate and reproducible results. That when our lab has been assessed, when our lab has been accredited, we are being certified by a third party that the results we deliver from the lab are accurate and reproducible and can be trusted, both for patient care and management, clinical trials, and other research needs, as it may be, even public health significance. And secondly, is recognition of compliance with the quality standards and norms used for the assessment. And then, you get awarded the certificate of accreditation. Now, there are several responsibilities for different people in the lab. If we start with the lab director implements international or national standards and seeks information about appropriate norms and standards. The lab director also seeks information about accreditation and certification processes and uses outcomes to provide better services. Now, if you're going to get accredited, say for example, by the College of American Pathologists, CAP, then it is actually the lab director who is getting the lab is getting accredited through the lab director. And if and when the lab director leaves that laboratory, then the accreditation lapses, and until and unless the new management can show that the incoming lab director has the same qualifications as approved by CAP. So then that's the lab director. Then on the other part, there is the laboratorian. Laboratorian must be aware of the requirements and also contribute to meeting these standards. They are also aware of assessment processes and help to prepare for assessment. At the end of the day, it is the laboratorian, the lab scientist, the lab technician, the lab technologist, lab assistant. That's where the rubber meets the road. These are the people who must own the process and must believe in the process so that they are able to meet the standards and ensure that the laboratory is assessed and accredited. One of the most important people in the whole of this process is the quality manager. The quality manager explains the process for meeting standards to staff and organizes the laboratory in preparation for assessments. The quality manager, this is the key cog, and the lab is only as strong as the quality manager, because this is the weakest link in the chain, if I may use that term, that this is the person who knows intimately the requirements and ensures that all of the requirements, all of the documents, the technical documents, the procedural documents, the managerial documents are available and in place as required, and that all of those processes are being adhered to. So let's look at some of the definitions that we use. Let's start with normative document. The normative document provides rules, guidelines, or characteristics for activities or their results. Standard document is established by consensus and approved by a recognized body that provides for common and repeated use, rules, guidelines, or characteristics for activities or their results aimed at the achievement of the optimum degree of order in a given context. And third is regulation. This is any standard that is mandated by a governmental agency or authoritative body. Now, let's look at some of the self-developed standards. Many agencies and organizations or regions develop their own accreditation requirements rather than use internationally recognized standards. The advantages of these self-developed standards are that they are optimized for local use, recognize local strengths and weaknesses, and can be developed in progressive steps. They can also lead to full international recognition. An example is the stepwise laboratory assessment towards accreditation, SLAMTA and SLIPTA, which have been developed by the African CDC through the WHO AFRO to help laboratories in the African region to develop standards and towards accreditation. So these are, star rated from 0 star to 1 star, 2 star, 3 star, 4 star, up to 5 star. And that when the laboratory reaches the 5-star level, then they are ready to apply for assessment and accreditation. Now, at the backbone of such a process is the accreditation standard that is being used. In this case, it is the ISO 15189. The weaknesses or disadvantages of these self-developed standards are that they may be narrow or biased and may not be recognized by other organizations. So say, for example, that, again, let's go back to the SLAMTA and SLIPTA, that, it has been a misnomer that labs, when they reach 2-star or 3-star, they think that they have the same rating, like, for example, which are used in hotels, that, oh, no, we're doing very good. No, that's not the case. It simply means that you're working towards achieving a 5-star and then applying for accreditation. So a short list of some of the international organizations of standardization bodies include the ISO, CLSI, CEN, and WHO. All of these, let's start with the ISO, which is the International Organization for Standardization. This is the world's largest developer and publisher of international standards, and it's the one which is most used commonly all over the world. And the standards are applicable to many kinds of organizations, including clinical and public health laboratories, amongst others. There are different standards for different processes, as I said, from clinical to public health laboratories, management, processing, testing, metrological, you name it. The CLSI, Clinical and Laboratory Standards Institute, is a global non-profit standards development organization which promotes the development and use of voluntary consensus standards and guidelines within the healthcare community. And the documents are developed by experts working on subcommittees or working groups. The European Committee for Standardization, CEN, is a national standards body in the European Economic Community and associated countries. And the general terms include openness, transparency, consensus, and integration within the countries that are subscribed to this standardization body. The WHO, World Health Organization, has developed several standards for disease-specific diagnostic laboratories, such as polio, tuberculosis, influenza, and measles. Now, when we look at the national standards and technical guidelines, these are country-specific standards and are based on international standards, which are adapted to the culture and general condition of the country. This does not mean that, a less developed country should do things differently from a developed economy. What is being used as a diagnostic method may be different, but it should be to the same level and to the same standard worldwide. If you say, for example, that a test is positive in one country, using these standards, it should also be positive in a far more advanced economy. And these national standards and technical guidelines supplement the ISO standards with technical guidance for use in laboratories and can address a specific kind of testing. So it's not something which is totally different from the ISO, but is supplementing. And it can be disease specific. So there are specific and national norms, standards, and regulations, and these are available for purchase. Some of them, like the WHO ones, are available free, but the ISO ones, you have to purchase them. The CLSI ones, you have to purchase them. Now, let's look a little bit at some of the definitions that are used. As I said in the introduction, what is the difference between when we say a lab is certified as opposed to a lab is accredited or a lab is licensed? Certification, for example, via ISO 17000 is a procedure by which a third party gives written assurance that a product, process, or service conforms to specific requirement. That they're saying that this product, this process, or this service conforms to a specific requirement. On the other hand, accreditation, let's say via ISO 15189, is a procedure by which an authoritative body gives formal recognition that a body or person is competent to carry out specific tasks. These bodies could be, for example, the Kenya National Accreditation Service, the KENAS, South African Accreditation Service, Ethiopian National Accreditation Office, and very many others. They will come and assess your lab and determine if there are any findings, minor findings, major findings, and give you time to make the corrections. After that, they will certify, they will accredit the lab that laboratory or that institution is competent to carry out specific tasks. The last one here is licensure, and this is granting of ability to practice provided most often by a local government agency, usually based on demonstrated knowledge, training, and skills. These could also be from the national government, which licenses the laboratory to exist. This provides the legal basis of the institution for its existence. If the institution, for example, is based at a university, then the university will provide the licensure, a letter of license that this laboratory is authorized and licensed to exist. More often than not, it is the central government or the federal government, as the case may be, or in some countries, it could be the local government agency that will do that. So there is a nexus between accreditation, licensure, and certification. So you may wonder, what do I go for? It depends really on why the laboratory was established in the first place. So you'll be wondering, which standards should the laboratory use? Does the lab need accreditation? How does the laboratory regard regulation? So all of these are answered by the management. What does the management want when they are setting up the laboratory? Is the lab part of a hospital? So definitely it will need licensure and accreditation. Is it a research lab? Is it an industry lab? So all of these go through different processes. But the elements of an accreditation process are: one, identifying the accreditation body, identifying and determining the standards that will be used, identifying the assessors, and the user laboratory. So certification and accreditation bodies must be approved. They must have and show to you that they have been approved by the relevant approval authorities. They must be knowledgeable. They must be standards-based, objective, and also must have competent staff. I remember one time in one of the places that I was, one of the assessors who came was a mechanical engineer. And I said, really, you may have read the standards, you may be familiar with them, but how? You don't have the necessary training, the necessary background training in laboratory science for you to be able to call yourself knowledgeable and for you to be objective in your assessment. So we wrote a letter of objection to the body, and that particular auditor was withdrawn. Examples of the commonly used standards are some of the certification standards are the ISO 9001, 2000, and ISO 14000. For accreditation standards, some of them are, for example, ISO 17025 and ISO 15189, including WHO polio standards. And for regulations, for example, the United States Clinical and Laboratory Improvement Act, CLIA regulations, French GBEA, and the UN Transport of Dangerous Goods regulations. So these are just examples of the commonly used standards. Let us look briefly at the scopes, for example, of ISO 17025. There is general requirements for competence and test calibration sampling. It's basically to confirm or recognize competence. Is the institution competent to do what they say they're doing in testing and calibration standards? So this basically goes for testing and calibration laboratories, and it assesses quality administrative technical systems. This standard, however, does not cover compliance with regulatory and safety requirements for laboratory operations. So this is just for testing and calibration laboratories. For the 15189, this is based on ISO 17025 1999, which has also been improved, and 9001 2000. This is for medical laboratories, particular requirements for quality and competence. That is what it examines, to confirm or recognize competence. That, for example, when your laboratory has applied for accreditation in microbiology methods, that your laboratory is competent in that area that it has applied for, and that the laboratory quality management technical processes are in place as approved, as required, and that there is quality administrative technical systems also in place. So the first question is, what is your laboratory? If your laboratory requires a licensure, then you have to look at when is it opening, things like that, and do you require certification, do you require accreditation, and if you require certification, do you have the SOPs, do you have the quality manuals, have you procured the necessary ISO standards? If it is accreditation, are you a reference laboratory, for example? Do you have the SOPs? Do you have the ISO manual? Do you have quality manual? Do you have ISO standard like 15189? So you have to be very specific in the things that are required for the type of laboratory that is either looking for licensure, certification, accreditation, or three of them. So the process for accreditation, it is not one to be taken lightly or without forethought. You have to be very clear in your mind as a lab manager or lab director that what is required is their commitment from the upper management. Because without commitment from the upper management, you're going nowhere. Without commitment from the staff, you're going nowhere. So that commitment, preferably in writing, that you are going to start the process for accreditation. That is a major requirement. After you get the commitment, then there is a planning process. When you're planning, do you have the resources? Do you have the knowledge? So these four elements are extremely important: commitment, planning, knowledge, and resources before you start the journey to accreditation. So even as you're looking at those four elements, there has to be consensus, which represents general agreement in the absence of strong and compelling objection. And or normative statement, which is required and essential part of the standard and includes the word shall. Informative statement, on the other hand, is an information, often a note, that may be explanatory or cautionary or provide an example. So all of these terms, you have to be very clear on them when I'm using the term consensus, when I'm using normative statement, which includes the word shall, meaning that it must, and informative statement, which could be explanatory or cautionary or provide an example. The other term is compliance, and this means both the text and the spirit of a requirement. Are you compliant in this, that, or the other one? And another one is non-conformity. That is the failure to fulfill the requirements of a specified process, structure, or service, and may be categorized as major, which is or complete, or minor, also termed as partial. So these are terms which are used during the audit processes. So if there are findings, like for example, when you're using the ISO standard, they may find a non-conformity, which will be categorized either as major, meaning it is a complete failure, or minor. And then based on whether it is major or minor, they will have different time periods upon which you are required to correct them. The last one is verification of conformity. This is a confirmation by examination of evidence that you conform. So accreditation does not guarantee success. It is only one step along the quality journey. So it's once you've been accredited, it's not the end. It is not a destination, but it is a continuous process that will you need to be improved on all the time as you proceed in the journey of providing service, whatever the service is. So ensuring that there is quality management, the reduction in errors or the complete elimination of errors. There is customer satisfaction. You would have determined who the customers of the lab are and that they are satisfied. And this is done by, for example, periodical customer satisfaction surveys. And that there is continual improvement. That, as I emphasize, that it is a journey and not a destination. Some of the accreditation outcomes are strength and integrity of the quality system. It's a pride and a good place of achievement to show that your laboratory is accredited, meaning that the customers will trust your results, will trust the work that is going on and all the processes that are going on in the laboratory, and these results into increased budgetary allocation, more funding, as I said, more work, more protocols, and more studies coming in, and more use of the service of that laboratory. And another outcome of accreditation is the continual monitoring of the quality system and recognition for efforts. Accredited laboratories tend to perform better on proficiency testing and are more likely to have a working quality management system. So with time, this becomes a culture of the lab. And as the manager, as the director, you want to make sure that you improve and implement a lab culture that tends to work better, give better results, whether it's proficiency testing, whether it is patient samples testing, research sample testing, clinical samples testing, and that you are more likely to have a working QMS, and people are more likely to trust you. It is an accomplishment to receive accreditation, and for you to put it in your CV, for you to put it in your resume, that you are the director, or you are the manager, or you are a staffer in an accredited laboratory. It's a huge achievement and a place of pride that you have been able to do that. Importantly, after achieving the primary accreditation, it's critical that you are able to maintain the accreditation. And it is an achievement to be able to maintain accreditation. That, you're not only worked tirelessly for the laboratory to be accredited, but that continually you are being able to maintain the accreditation. So in summary, standards provide guidelines that form the basis for quality practices. They are developed by organizations. Accreditation and certification are processes that recognize that a lab is meeting the designated standards, and an active QMS program can assure the lab is in a constant state of accreditation readiness. And the key messages to take away from this podcast is that accreditation is an important step in the continual improvement of the quality management system, and that it is an accomplishment to be accredited. It is an achievement to maintain accreditation. I welcome your questions, your comments, and I'll be giving back-to-back podcast on this one. And as usual, you can reach me at joundo664 at gmail.com. Thank you, and bye-bye.